Um, I would like to begin this video by a joke. Um, the success of this channel will be the death of me. And someday, mankind will understand the joke and will laugh at me. And yeah, they will understand why. I have many things to say today because I am inspired. And I would like to remind the viewers of this channel that my emotions, which are chemical reactions within my body and my brain, are connected to the emotions of the substance, which is the whole of being. And my emotions determine my thoughts, and the way I see things, it is the self-movement of thought which determines the emotions, but they are in a reciprocal relationship nonetheless. So to make things intelligible, I am a lunatic and I am moody, and I switch from one positive emotion to another. I can experience joy and enthusiasm and the minute after, depression and anxiety and hopelessness and anger and when I feel negative emotions, I try to become a stoic and to master my own emotions and to control the flow of thought and the chemical reactions within my brain, but it's easier said than done. But I can't help feel joyful when I understand the world and myself. This is how I am. I am joyful when I grasp speculative truths and when I find rationality within the world. So this is how I am. And yeah, I would like to begin this video by a boring introduction to Hegel's logic, and especially the concept of quantity. Usually I read the German version because I said that it's better to read a text in its original language, and somehow, although my German is not very good, I understand Hegel better in German than in French or in English. But today I read the French edition of the Science of Logic. We are a spirit made manifest to itself. The entire world is a spiritual entity. I know it sounds very difficult to understand because we see a material world, but matter is a manifestation of mind. And all the modes of thought, the individual consciousnesses in the world, are moments in the process of becoming conscious of itself, of absolute spirit. The introduction, which is not by Hegel, but by a Hegelian scholar, says that the science of logic is the pure ether of thought reflecting logically upon itself. And this is speculative thinking. And Aristotle knew that thought, thinking itself, is the highest good, the highest joy, the highest endeavor of mankind is to think itself conceptually in a speculative way. There is a distinction within Hegel's logic between objective logic, which is the theory of being and of essence, that which in Greek is called ens, which gave the word entity. An entity is a mixture of being and essence. So there is the objective logic, which is traditionally metaphysics, the grasping of being and the objects into a thinking activity of the mind. And the subjective logic is the science of the way the mind thinks, and traditional classical Aristotelian logic is, in Hegel's system, incorporated while being reshaped, restructured within subjective logic. And the traditional classical metaphysics is incorporated within objective logic, but the two must coincide eventually. So that's why Hegel's logic is both ontological, it's the doctrine of being and essence, and logical, it's the doctrine of the laws of thought. The purpose and the difficulty is to expose, to bring forth in a clear and rigorous, which means intelligible way, the self-totalization of thought, thinking itself, and thinking being. I know that sounds quite obscure, but we, wherever there is a we are a self-moving being thinking itself. And I am not Hegel. I cannot speak like Hegel. I cannot be as rigorous, as clear, as intelligible as Hegel, because I am, as an individual, I am trapped within my empirical self, which is limited by its cognitive abilities. My intelligence as an empirical individual is not infinite; it is limited, and I am determined by my empirical existence, my knowledge of world history and culture and art and all the spheres of spirit, economics and sociology and the sciences of nature. My knowledge as an empirical individual is limited, so I am not capable of speaking like a true philosopher by being purely abstract, conceptual, logical. I try to do it as much as I can, but I am flawed as an empirical individual. So Kant, before Kant, Immanuel Kant, I already said it, before Kant, the classical metaphysics, the metaphysicians, tried to grasp the reality, the essence, the truth of things, the world, God, the thing, what is a thing? It was an ontological question. The soul, what is the soul? What are the properties of the soul? They tried by a thinking activity to extract the metaphysical truth, the thinking truth of the essence of things. And Kant said, I simplify, what the philosophers and the metaphysicians of old did not understand is that they were projecting the categories of their own mind, and the categories are the boxes in which we classify being, like quality, quantity, relation, modality, possible, impossible, existent, non-existent, cause and effect, limit and reality and negation. These are, according to Kant, the structure of our transcendental ego, which is not the empirical psychological ego. It is, according to Kant, pure reason, which is the faculty of thinking, which, according to Kant, is equal in every thinking mind. And as an empirical individual, I discovered that apparently the Chinese do not use the same Kantian categories as we Westerners think we do. So what Kant thought was the universal structure of the human mind was not strictly universal. But yet, Kant said the old metaphysician believed that they grasped the essence and the truth about things by conceptually thinking about them. But what they did not see was that they were projecting unconsciously the structure of their own mind onto the objects, so that the object was qualified and attributes were predicated to the object, which were, according to Kant, the structure of the transcendental ego. So Kant said, I simplify, before trying to grasp the essence of things, what things really are, we should inquire about the faculties, the possibility of knowledge. We should make an introspection, but not in our empirical psychological self, but in the very structure of our mind. It must be reason seeking itself and inquiring about its own capabilities and its own mode of functioning, its own cognitive structure. And the philosophy of Kant says that we cannot grasp how things are in themselves, the Ding an sich, what really is out there, we cannot know. We can only know how things appear to us through the mediation of our mind. So, according to Kant, we transform the thing in itself into thoughts by the mediation of our mind, and we can know what the phenomena are, which is the phenomenal appearance of the external world, but we cannot know what is beyond the phenomena, what he calls the Ding an sich, or the absolute. It is unintelligible because the structure of our mind is limited, and when reason tries to grasp the supersensuous, what is above the phenomena, it enters into contradictions within itself, because the categories of reason, of the transcendental ego, are self-contradictory, and they are unable to grasp what should be infinite, because they are finite. And yeah, so this is a moment in the process of reason becoming conscious of itself, and the Kantian moment is that Kant believed that reason, which is the higher faculty of thinking, was unable to grasp the true essence of things. It could only understand the phenomena, the appearance of things, and it could only understand itself. And Hegel disagreed with Kant, because Hegel believed that the categories of the mind, which in his view is subjective logic, and the categories of being, which is objective logic, are identical, but also in a process of self-differentiation and self-reunion of their identity. And this entire process, which is dialectical, which is negation and reunion, is the movement of thought, which produces the movement of nature, the world of time, space, and matter, and the movement of spirit, which is the movement of the individual self-consciousness. Yeah. According to Hegel, formal logic, which is Aristotelian logic, classical logic, is irrational, because reason, for Hegel, is the grasping of what we call irrational, because reason is the conceptual grasping of its opposite within itself. And classical formal logic presuppose that thought is separated from content, that the form and the content are different, and that logic is just the structure of our mind. Hegel says that this view is irrational, because for Hegel, logic is not only the structure of our mind, but the very structure of being. That's why I at least, find myself, the structure of my mind within being, because they are identical, while still being separated. And that's what Hegel calls the negative. It's the moment of the self-thinking totality being separated and differentiated from itself. So Hegel, in the view of Hegel, Kant was irrational, and in the view of Kantian, and today everyone is a Kantian almost, Hegel was completely irrational. So it's a mirror image to say that Kant, which in the mind of Westerners, modern Westerners, is the symbol of rationality, of intelligence, of a rigorous understanding of nature and the mind. In the view of Hegel, Kant was irrational because he could not grasp the infinite truth of being, thinking itself. Yeah. But Hegel credited and gave credit to Kant because Kant discovered that reason, which is self-thinking thought, the transcendental ego, enters into contradiction within itself, that the categories of the mind dialectically negate themselves, and Kant believed that dialectics was some sort of an illusion of reason, and for Hegel, it's the very logic of reality, because dialectic is a process of self-negation and coming back into itself after having been negated, and this is a process of differentiation and reunification, reuniting in a way. So Kant transformed metaphysics into logic, and yeah. So to simplify, Hegel's philosophy is formally Kantian, but the content is anti-Kantian. It's Hegel believed, when I speak, that we as rational beings could, not only could, but had to, it was our purpose to conceptually grasp the infinite and the absolute. And yeah, so he was formally a Kantian, but the content was totally opposed to Kant. Yeah. And then there's Fichte, the German philosopher, who comes, it's chronologically comes after Kant, but actually it's a moment in the self-presentation of reason to itself with the doctrine of science, the Wissenschaftslehre. Fichte tries to show how the categories of the mind give birth to themselves in a flowing, self-moving moment, and how the categories, which are the structure that our mind unconsciously uses to categorize, to classify, to order being, how they originate from within themselves and flow one through the other. And it was the first attempt to deduce the structure of the mind from its own self-movement. And this was the achievement of what Kant calls transcendental logic, which is real metaphysics. It's a self-totalization of reason, which is identification with itself, but also differentiation with itself. And to be reunited is a great joy, but it presupposes that what is being reunited has first been being separated, and separation is the moment of suffering. And I hate to say it, but from a speculative viewpoint, it's the truth that in order to experience the joy of reunion, one must first experience the suffering of disunion and separation. And then Schelling tried to apply the structure of the mind, which is not the empirical psychological ego, but the higher principle of reason, to realize reason, to explain how the structure of the mind was made manifest in nature, and that nature was some sort of a mirror of the transcendental ego. And to have a speculative view of nature is to be able to grasp the determinations of the mind within nature. And just to take an example, magnetism, in a magnetic relationship, which is a determination of nature, the opposite poles, the polarity, positive and negative, are in a conceptual unity with one another. And in the realm of speculative logic, the positive is in relation with the negative. They are different, but they are nonetheless one. And Hegel explained that what he calls the concept, which is speculative thinking, it's the activity of the mind grasping itself in its own difference. So it's the faculty of uniting the opposites. It is reflected in nature, in electromagnetism, for instance. It's electromagnetism is a logical idea made manifest in the realm of nature. Yeah. The logic, speculative logic, in its requirement and demand for identity, uses the differences and the determinations like quality, quantity, relation, substance, and causality, or the formal definitions of logic like concept, judgment, syllogism, in proving how they flow, they move one into the other, how they are self-moving and self-producing, and how there is a logical connection between the categories of being, the categories of essence, and the categories of formal logic, how they all originate from themselves, and how they pass into one another. And this self-differentiating, self-moving, self-organizing, self-structuring process of reason is, in its abstraction, what we call the mind of God. And the mind of God exteriorizes itself and brings forth a world. And nature is the mirror image of the logical idea, according to Hegel, and that's why nature is rational. And the individual consciousness must, by a conceptual grasping of the identity of logic and nature, realize and achieve the speculative unity of the three spheres of this logical totality, differentiating itself from itself and recognizing itself. Yeah. And the phenomenology of spirit, which is not the book, which is the process of world spirit becoming conscious of itself, is a scientific introduction to science, because I try to show in some of my videos that the movement of consciousness in the world, especially the Western world, which as an empirical individual I am most familiar with, is a product of the movement of the conditions of being, sociological, economic, demographic, cultural, political, that the conditions of being produce modes of consciousness which they themselves act upon the conditions of being in a dialectical interplay. And this entire process of consciousness becoming aware of itself as being the totality thinking itself is the phenomenology of spirit. And there is a logical structure, a hidden, invisible structure in the process of consciousness. God, or the divine, is the identity of identity and difference. The identity of the subject and the object, of mind and nature, of what is, what thinks and what is thinking, thought and being, rationality and reality, logic and metaphysics. Yeah. And to explain the phenomenology of spirit, consciousness, and as individual thinking minds, we are all individual consciousnesses. We are plunged into a world, and when we are within the world, we ask ourselves, not only one, but actually at some moment we do, is what is the world? And the first thing that can be said is that it is being. There is something being. We are. And to say that it is, it seems the wealthiest form of knowledge, because as of now I am in my apartment, and when I say it is, I see a window, a building, a television, books, a computer, a book. It is, but this knowledge is the poorest, most abstract form of knowledge, because if I really wanted to say what all of this is, I would have to produce an encyclopedic speech to explain how the things which are have come into being, and to produce an encyclopedic speech which conceptualizes within itself the totality of being in the process of evolution and of becoming conscious of itself. And yeah. Yeah. And the categories of being, which are also the categories of the mind, they go into one another. They self-produce. They self-create. They must be logically deduced from one another. And that I don't understand. How can logic and all the categories of the mind spring forth or emerge out of nothing? I mean, I do vaguely, because I've read Hegel's logic, but the idea that I want to share is that everything which exists, and to exist means to come out of the ground, out of the primordial void, to be brought forth into existence, and to be confronted by a world which is. And how can this world and logic and spirit emerge out of nothing? That's uh, he says that the requirement of absolute knowing, and absolute knowing is the knowledge of the self in the other. And this process of recognition and reinstallment, reestablishment of self-identity with otherness is brought forth by a series of mediation, necessary mediation. And to mediate means to bring forth another, which is a negative moment. And one cannot have an immediate knowledge of the divine, but it must be mediated by a path of the negative, which everyone hates. And this process of self-differentiation and re-establishment of self-identity is made actual through the encyclopedic grasping of the totality of being, which is made manifest in the realm of nature and spirit. And here spirit is the world of the finite consciousness, and all the modes of the manifestation of the finite consciousness in history, politics, religion, philosophy. And at the root of all these manifestations of human spirit, apparently, there is a logical process. So the world of nature and the world of spirit is the manifestation of logic. And what I am trying to do is to check if it's true. And yeah. Yeah. And this self-moving being, self-thinking thought, must create or discover or bring forth its own method of knowledge. It must, I made a video a couple of days ago to show that it is in the very concept of the logical development, which comes out of nothing or out of being, to produce the knowledge of itself and to be the foundation of all forms of knowledge. So I will make videos after that to show that mathematics must be founded upon logic, and it is an attempt made by Russell and Whitehead, but it must be founded upon speculative logic, and people in the modern world believe that mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology are the most certain kind of knowledge. And the Hegelian view is that art, religion, and philosophy are more real, more true than mathematics and physics. But these manifestations of absolute spirit have their truth in a logical process, and logic must be the foundation of mathematics, because in my view God is a logician, and if mathematics is derived from logic, a certain view, a deistic or theistic, I don't know, view especially important in the 18th century, was that God was a mathematician, and then that nature was made of numbers. It was Pythagoras and the modern scientific revolution, the idea that we should interpret nature as the manifestation of mathematical laws. But if mathematics is derived from logic, one should be able to understand and to explain how the mathematical view of the world can arise from a logical movement within the mind of God. And he says that the price is heavy in order to master oneself conceptually, because the price to pay is the moment of the negative. But the purpose is to build a new philosophical sanctuary, a new temple founded upon modern culture. And that's the purpose of cultural Hegelianism. So this introduction was quite long, and I will make now another video to talk about quantity, and then I have plans, if one might speak of a plan, to make other videos, because like I said, I am inspired, and I need to express my thoughts and to share and to feel intellectually alive. Yeah.